Good evening to everybody. This is going to be a re-recording of our third session for It Matters, Missions America, It Matters. And we're going to be talking about time management tonight. When we did the live session, I didn't get a chance to finish it as usual. And so my intention is to be able to have completed videos that you'll be able to access on Vimeo now. We're moving our our archive mediums to and all our information to Vimeo, all of our recordings anyway. And so tonight we'll be talking about time management, and let me get myself situated here where we can begin to. All right. So welcome to my home in Kingston, Tennessee, session 3 of Mission America, It Matters. And again, just to remind everybody, that word It Matters, the word MATTERS is an acronym for Missions America Training to Equip Ready Servants. That's what it's about. And I take what I do very seriously. And recently I was at the NYC in Nashville, Tennessee this past weekend. And we had a booth set up there, and so many pastors had come by expressing their concern, their burden, their understanding of the fact of how few people that they have to be able to call on to help in their particular districts with whether it's a church opening or a church that they would like to sponsor in starting or doing a daughter work. And folks, we need to get very, very serious about preparing ourselves to be used of God in areas of reaching into unchurched cities and municipalities. There are so many of them in America. And that is our goal. That is our mission in Missions America. I know that's the heartbeat of Matt Purdue and Brother Stephen Traxel, our director and secretary of Missions America. And I know it's my heartbeat. And so I do hope that we get as many as possible that have signed up. I know we've had 55 or 60 now that have registered for It Matters. And I hope if you're not able to join us live, that you are able to sit down quiet for a quiet moment and take an hour, whatever length these sessions become, and absorb this information. I will be including on our website, Missions America website, on the resource page. You'll be able to download my outlines for it. In fact, I'm going to allow submit on this particular lesson the very outline that I'm teaching from, so you don't have to do any fill in the spaces. Of course, I'm leaving space around it for you to be able to write your thoughts or write some things that I mentioned that maybe aren't on the outline here. But that is what is happening here tonight in Kingston, Tennessee. So let me begin talking about time management. Now, we've talked so far about leadership. We had 2 sessions on leadership, and now we're going to be talking about how a leader should be managing their time. Any saint, really, anybody, any person who's an entrepreneur, anybody who intends on getting things accomplished in life, does need to come to grips with the fact that we need to manage the events and circumstances and issues of our life. In reading, first of all, scripture tonight, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting with verse 1, very familiar text of scripture to most. In fact, there was a good song written from this scripture back in the 60s, back in my day, my pre-church years, back in the 60s. And I think it was written by the Byrds. And the words of the writers say this: "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to cast away, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, a time of peace. So we read here in Scripture that apparently God keeps pretty close track of time and events. And I'm going to do one thing real quickly here. Okay. I suddenly had this fear in my mind that I did not turn the recorder on, which I have done before. And I certainly didn't want to sit here for an hour or more and talk without having it being recorded again. All right. So let's talk about time management a little bit here. There's only three ways basically, unless we're sleeping, that we can spend our time, our waking hours. We spend it in thoughts, we spend it in actions, or we spend it in conversations. Thoughts, actions, conversations. Now, many in our world subscribe to the notion that staying busy, and this is something that is a real issue with guys. This is almost a guy thing, a men thing. But many subscribe to the notion that staying busy means you're working hard and are going to be more successful. We associate staying busy with success. There seems to be some kind of a psychological tie in there in our thinking often. Managing our time isn't about squeezing as many tasks into our day as possible. It's about simplifying how we work, doing things faster, more efficiently, relieving stress. That's the goals of time management. It's about clearing away space in our life to make time for people, recreation, and rest, scheduling those things. Although we often say there's just not enough hours in a day, we often use that phrase, but man, there's just not enough hours in a day. I promise you there really are enough hours in a day for everything that we would like to do, even though for all of us it doesn't seem like it at times. But what it does take is a bit of rearranging and reimagining to find the time in the course of a 24-hour day to do those things that we know we want to accomplish, that we want to get done. So now let's start off with this fact. The term time management is somewhat of a misnomer. We cannot manage time. We manage the events in our life in relation to time. Again, we often wish for more time, but we all get the same amount of time, 24 hours a day, 1,440 minutes a day, or 86,400 seconds each day. So it's not a matter of us managing time, being able to manage to where we can say, well, I want to put this time over here, take a little time from tomorrow and put it in today to finish this, and I won't finish as much tomorrow. We cannot manage or rearrange time. We can only manage and rearrange the events within the time that we have. So how we use that time depends on skills learned through self-analysis, planning, evaluation, and self-control. Much like money, time is both valuable and limited. It must be protected, used wisely, and budgeted. It may sound strange using that terminology that we use with our finances, budgeting, in relation to time, but it's exactly what we need to do with it. We need to, it's limited, we need to protect it, use it wisely, and we need to budget it. When you think about it, if you're pastoring a church right now, or you are in full-time ministry, or if you have a business, you are an entrepreneur. So that means that you are required to manage your own time. In other words, you're not punching a clock. Someone's not breathing down your neck to make sure you're clocking in at 8 o'clock, clocking out at 12 for an hour for lunch, clocking back in, etc. You are managing or arranging your own time according to what you deem to be the important things for you to accomplish in the course of each day. So you are responsible for structuring your own time. You're an entrepreneur. Now, there is clock time, actual time on a wall clock. There's clock time, and there is real time. Real time. And what we really work on, we look at a clock and so forth, but through the course of a day, I'm sure we all do, but what we operate in the realm of real time. It's difficult to really function all the time by a clock, but we operate in real time. And by that, I mean that it is by our own perception, the amount of time that we have to do any given task, or the time that transpires during any given task. In other words, time flies or it drags relative to what we're doing. We can be doing a task and it's something we really enjoy or something we're really good at, and we can say, man, I can't believe how much time is going by. Time flies, man. And then we can be involved in something that is so mundane, something we do not like as much to do, one of those tasks that we just do out of responsibility, but we kind of dread it. And then sometimes in the middle of that, we can say, oh, time is dragging, time is dragging. The reality of both of those statements, time flies or time is dragging, the reality of that is the clock time is exactly right on point. Nothing has changed with that time. The exact amount of seconds, minutes, hours, whatever it is, has transpired during both of those events. The perception of how fast or slow the time is going is what is important at that time. And that's what I'm calling real time. That's our real time. Our perception of the time that we have is often our real time. But time is time. It's the same for all of us. All right. So the first thing I would suggest, very important, is that we start keeping a log of our time in 15-minute increments for 10 to 15 days. You got to know how you spend your time. The first thing that when I talk about finances, I used to teach some courses on finances in Bible school in South Florida. And one of the first things we need to do in budgeting, any good budget counselor, any good financial counselor will tell you this, is first of all, we've got to know how we're spending our money, right? We've got to know where all that money is going. So many times there's these little blind areas, it seems, in many people's spending habits, that they're not aware that they're spending $45 a month at Starbucks or $50 at Burger King or whatever. All those little incidental things that suddenly add up and they don't know where $300 or $400 a month went. And because they're not keeping track. So the first thing you do in finances is you take a little log with you and you write down every dollar you spend for 30 days to 45 days. So you get an idea of seeing how much money you're spending on what. So we need to do the same thing with our time. We need to keep a close log of our time and just right now, the way we're spending our time, not changing anything necessarily, but just how we're spending our time right now. With a little scratch pad, little notebook, in maybe 15-minute increments for maybe 10 to 15 days. Now they may sound like a real pain, a real tedious thing, but if we're serious about really wanting to get a handle on time management, really wanting to get a handle on knowing how to be productive or more efficient, these are some of the little things that we need to do. We need to be, very mindful of where and how we're spending our time, very honest with ourselves. We don't want to leave a 30-minute segment out and, we're sitting there, we're playing on Facebook and you write in your 30 minutes that you were praying. Obviously you're defeating the purpose if you are, filling in your little increments with inaccurate information. So that's the very first thing we need to do, is take a 10 to 15 day block of time and be very honest, very intentional about writing down the time you wake up, the time you wake up, time you go to bed, everything included, when you eat, all that kind of stuff, how much time you're spending, what you're doing in those time frames. Probably some of you, it may shock you. All right. Three little things right off the bat here that I do want to mention, and these are kind of just general categories of redeeming three quick little that I think are easy ways, but good ways to redeem, learn to redeem some of our time. Okay, first of all, Prepare to use downtime wisely. We all have times of downtime, whether it's a doctor's appointment or waiting in line for something for an extended period of time. Driving is a good downtime. So these are times that we can be, if you have an iPhone, if you use a day timer, or we're going to talk about later about keeping a scratch pad or notebook with you at all times to unload your brain so you're not having to overload your brain with a bunch of things you need to remember and you end up forgetting 75% of them because that's just the way that our mind is. Using that downtime wisely, from anything from catching up on reading something that you know you need to read or take in. It can be study time. You can be using any kind of podcasts, that sort of thing, of utilizing that time wisely. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that we have to fill every minute of the day in doing something, or we're not going to be successful, or we're wasting time, or that kind of thing. But I am just saying that there are often large blocks of time that we can use wisely, putting that downtime to use that saves us time later if we need to do it anyway. And it can be done during downtime. It is the best time to get some of those things done, because it frees up time later to be able to get something else done on our daily to-do list that we need to do. All right. Another very important key, and I'm just going to mention three things here. Prepare to use downtime wisely. Another very important key is starting early. I do not know any of you what your personal habits are. I don't know if you sleep till 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning. But in bios of successful people, almost all have one thing in common. It's the old early to bed, early to rise. And starting that day early, getting a jump on the day, not letting the day get a jump on you, so to speak, where you're already clambering out of bed and you're already behind the 8 ball and you're rushing through this and you're wolfing down a donut for breakfast and running out the door, or whatever, or you skip your prayer time, and all those things that can happen in an unscheduled sort of haphazard kind of a lifestyle. Someone who doesn't have a handle on time management, who lets the day rule them rather than them ruling the day, so to speak, the time of the day anyway. All right, so prepare to use downtime wisely, start early. And the third thing that can be a big time helper is where it is at all possible, delegate. Delegating is like buying time. And I want to add to that we can buy time. We have people that do things for us in churches that the vast majority of them are volunteers. And out of those volunteers, and I guess I'm really kind of talking to pastors and associate pastors now, maybe even youth pastors, full-time youth pastors. Out of those volunteers, you're going to have some that that are going to kind of be the cream of the crop. Those are the ones that you can always rely on. You don't need to wonder if they're going to be at the service, if they're going to be on their post and whatever responsibility they have before service, after service, during service, whatever the situation is, they're your key people. Well, I want to mention something to you here that I read in a book, and I love the idea. And this just goes so far. You can make that person simply to even get more, just if it's possible, even a better frame of mind, a better attitude of servitude and service for you by making that person, and this sounds really simple, a $50 a month employee. Think about how a person would react if you've got 2 or 3 people that are your key people, that once a month, sometime during the month, you walk by and you maybe even give them this little thank you card, or forget the thank you card. You might want to just once in a while give them a thank you card, letting them know how much you really appreciate them. These things, I mentioned it in leadership, go a long, long way with people. That sticks with them. It's encouraging. but you give them a $50 gift card or something to a restaurant or something, if you know they're really into hunting or fishing, whatever, to one of the big sporting outlets or something. Just a $50 a month employee. Yeah, they're not on the payroll. You can't pay them, but you're just, giving them a little gift in that way. I will tell you, their attitude and their loyalty to you will multiply tenfold, believe me. And you're going to have an advocate. Just a simple thing, $50 a month employee. Just remember that. And they can be a great key to taking a load of things that they're able to handle that are maybe sometimes mundane tasks to you. They will be thrilled to help you take that burden off you when they know that you've got your eye on them. You appreciate what they're doing in even that small way. And it wouldn't matter if you've got 3 or 4 of them like that. So it costs you $150, $200 a month for 3 or 4 employees, so to speak, that are working basically for nothing. Anyway, goes a long way. So, and it can free up a lot of your time. All right. So let's talk now about the essentiality. We're talking about time management, trying to get some common sense things here. There's so many books out there written on time management. And I've been to many seminars through the years, having been many years in the business world. I still am in a business that I do kind of part-time. And many things written and things talked about in time management. I'm trying to cull this down. I do 2 things with it: cull it down to some of the very basic, important things of time management, where we're not going to get overloaded in this lesson with a lot of little details, 90% of which most of you will never do. And also gear it toward us not being so much in the business world, but gearing it toward also having different goals than business people. Our number one goal is making heaven our home, right? And so I'm trying to gear this lesson toward those two goals here. So the essentiality of getting organized. A lot of people go through life not being very organized. I've recognized that, being in a role in several churches, probably half a dozen churches, in a role of leadership and a lot of my leadership has pertained to areas of administration, working with details. And you can't do that without being organized. The fact that I'm organized is what allows me to handle, a pretty good volume of details and keep details, in order and in control, so to speak. So, but in whatever area, in whatever level of responsibility you have in the kingdom of God, it is very, very important to get organized. Now, to you pastors, I do not mean this in any snide way or in any bad way, but some of the pastors that I have worked with, this seems to be a trait. They've got the anointing. They're good preachers, and they definitely have vision, but they're not always the best at organizing. They can cast a vision, but oftentimes they don't know how to make the projections and the little steps that are necessary to see the vision fulfilled. And so that's where any good pastor, needs helps around them, but people that maybe are a little bit more organized as they are. Now, by the same token, I've known pastors. I can think of one, for example, that was raised up. He was just a young man in our church that my wife used to go do bus ministry with, who's now a really great pastor, and that is Daryl Johns. He's pastor of Atlanta West, just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. That man is very organized, pastor, visionary, and extremely, extremely organized, wonderful, excellent time manager. And he's not the only one. I would have to say, obviously, that Brother David K. Bernard is a very organized man, and I'm sure the list goes on and on. I'm just thinking of a couple on the top of my head. So it isn't necessarily, one of the required traits of pastoring is that you are not organized. I'm not trying to say that, but oftentimes their gifting is in a totally different area. So, however, that being said, pastors and those who are aspiring to be pastors, it is going to help you tremendously if you get at least some small modicum of organization and time management going in your favor. That is absolutely for sure. Okay. So for all of us, the bottom line is, after all that talking, the bottom line is it is essential. It is essential that we get organized. So let's talk about a few points of organization. First essentiality of getting organized is having a tidy workspace as much as possible. Now, my workspace, in all honesty, can get tidy at times. I'll take sometimes through the month to at least organize the piles that I know what's in them and where things are. But my desk does not look always like my wife's desk, who is an extreme neatnik when it comes to, she works with me in the business, and she always starts her day with a very clean desk and ends her day with a very clean desk. And I joke with her about how neat she is in that way. Mine doesn't always work out that way, but it definitely is important as much as is possible again, in relation to the type of work that we're doing, to keep a tidy workspace so that we're not wasting repetitive efforts with just flipping through papers and looking for things and moving things around and pushing things around to get the necessary desk space just to lay out a notebook or lay out a file or that sort of thing. Keeping a tidy workspace helps aid our efficiency in the task at hand. It's that simple. All right. All right. Filing system. Filing system. Oh, I don't care who you are. You need to have a good filing system. Now, I keep two filing systems. Actually, three filing systems. They're all in the same office, but three filing systems. One for things pertaining to my church lessons and church studies and things pertaining to my ministry, and then my personal family stuff, all of my files for my bills and taxes and all those things that just happen in life. And then because I have a business, I have to keep good, accurate business files. So I have to keep three individual filing systems. Even though they're all in the same room, there's three separate filing systems. One business analysis said as much as, listen to this, as much as 30% of business time in business is spent looking for things misplaced, as much as 30%. And I have to believe that. Again, I've been in business. I've had employees years ago, South Florida. We had 7 employees. And, you get going through the hustle and bustle of the day, and things, if you're not organized, can get easily misplaced, especially files, letters and papers that are supposed to be in certain files, and so forth. And so I can believe that could happen. The object of filing is to store items so they can be easily retrieved at a future date. I will read that simple definition again. The object of a filing system, ideally, is to store items so they can be easily retrieved at a future date. That's the goal of a good filing system. All right. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of how to set up a filing system. I may talk a little bit about it in this lesson. I forget some of my notes here. But there are several ways to set up a filing system. There's all kinds of things. Walk through an office supply store, look online at the different things that are there to help you get organized with a good file cabinet with hanging folders, and then manila folders, tri-cut or whatever manila folders. You simply write the name of that category you're talking about, group it together with other like things, put it in some sensible, logical order. Most of the time it's alphabetical or by subjects, depending on the type of filing you're doing. It's not rocket science, but it takes diligence and intentionality to do it and to keep up with it. Saves a ton of time when you do it. So for some reason, it seems like a monumental task, but it saves a lot of time. 2 potential problems with a filing system. Number 1, attempting to save too much. when you're filing something, make sure it falls in one of two categories. Either something that you need to retrieve on a regular basis, or something that you may only need to retrieve once a year. For example, maybe information in a tax folder on certain items that or deductions or whatever, for example, in a tax folder. I'm just thinking here off the top of my head quickly, but something that you may not have to retrieve that often. If it's something that you probably will never, ever look for again, but you're looking through something and say, oh, I should save that. I should probably save that. If you really can't think of a good, honest reason why you will ever do that, you're going to end up with a massive file system that'll be very, very confusing, full of junk that you will never, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, ever remember why you stuck it in there. And so don't save too much of unnecessary things. Make sure that there's a good reason for you saving it. And then the other problem with filing is that ineffective organization. Ineffective organization, and that's what I'm mentioning about being sure that your filing system makes sense. Something that is easy to retrieve information from. Be selective about what you save. Okay. Now, if you're involved, for example, in doing a project, how often have you been involved in a project and you're doing one part of a project and suddenly you remember, oh man, I had something I wanted to put on. I had something I wanted to do with that project. I was thinking of something the other day. I saw it in a magazine. I saw it in the book. I had a paper on it. Where did I put that paper? It's on my desk somewhere. It's in my office. I left it at church. We go around in circles, and see, those are the kind of things that are so unproductive. And so if you've got a project that you're going to start, the very first thing you would want to do is start a project file. Start a project file. Name it. This is this project. Whatever it is. I don't care what it is. Might be Christmas program. Okay. And then you're going to break down what you want to do and I'm thinking maybe of a choir director or something, whatever, music director. Break down all the different parts that would be involved in that Christmas program. All the different things pertaining to the practices and so far. All the different parts that you want to have practice with. And I'm not a music director, so I don't know all the details of what you would have to do. But whatever the project is, you start with just a project file or even a project section in the file drawer and begin to make up manila folders for all the little different areas. And then anything that comes up that you're pulling a paper from here, seeing something here, make sure it goes into that file so that when you're working on that project, everything is in the project file. Sounds simple, and it really, once you develop the habit of doing it, it is simple. It is the best way to do it. It beats running around all over the place and looking for stuff constantly. It beats doing that. Separate regularly used files from infrequently used files. Decide on a systematic way to file. Again, how you file is up to you. You can try different ways until something works for you, but a simple, either alphabetical order file is usually the best way to find things. Or if you're sectioning it into projects and so forth, even those projects in alphabetical order. Periodically purge your files. When you see your files starting to get huge and you're done with the project and you've culled it down to the necessary things that pertained specifically to that project, you can cull out all the other stuff that wasn't necessary, and then you can maybe save that. You might revisit that project or do it down the road, or somebody might want to do that project somewhere else and you say, hey, I did that. Here's my project file. Take a look through here. But you want to periodically purge your files of things that are no longer relevant. And just like in leadership, where we want to constantly fine-tune our skills in leadership, learn what works, what doesn't, and fine-tune along the way, we want to do the same thing with our organizational skills. Once you get on that road of wanting to be organized, you will learn little shortcuts and little tips here and there. It's a matter of just fine-tuning it. The key is, as they say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. if you look at 1,000-mile journey, like a 1,000-mile journey, it could look like a daunting journey. But if you, and you know, I don't want to be cliche, but if you realize that it's a one step at a time process, you just, at some point, have to just begin taking those steps. And next thing you know, it's not a 1,000-mile journey, it's an 800-mile journey. And then it's a 600, and then it's a 400, etc. Then pretty soon you can see the finish line and the horizon, you know. It's just a matter of you know, staying with it, doing the necessary tasks at hand to fulfill the entire project, to fulfill the entire goal. So fine-tuning those organizational skills will help us. All right. So we talked about filing system. Important to have a good filing system. These are basic foundational things to a good organizational system or time management system. Managing our time. I know it's a misnomer, but you know what I'm saying, managing those things within that time frame. All right. Next important item on my list here is the daily to-do list. Daily to-do list. Now, when we make a daily to-do list, and I'm sure at some point, I would imagine, I know I'm dealing with some younger guys and girls here that'll be listening to this, according to those that have registered. And I'm sure at some point, I would imagine that all of you, for whatever reason, may have occasionally written a to-do list. Maybe because you had a project you were working on, so you decided to do a to-do list, or you were going to the store and you made a to-do list or a list of things to get. A to-do list is just those things that we simply need to complete in the course of a day, the daily to-do list. Now, when we make the to-do list, and this again is something that we will learn to, you know, be better and better at as time goes by, as we improve our organizational skills, our time management skills. Our to-do list needs to be a realistic one. If you make a to-do list thinking, wow, I'm really going to get organized and I'm going to write everything down, and just by virtue of the fact that I'm writing on this list, I'm going to get it done, and you put 50 items on there to get done for that day, you are going to get real discouraged real quick with your to-do list. So the very first point that I want to make about a to-do list is it has to be realistic. A realistic to-do list, okay? The second thing that I want to mention is you do not want to make multiple to-do lists. One to-do list that you work off of. If you make multiple ones, you cause confusion and you're going to add to your frustration. The idea of a to-do list is to alleviate some of your frustration. Okay, let's read here. I've listed several advantages of using a to-do list. Okay, here we go. You ready? Here are some advantages of using a to-do list. Focuses your mind on important objectives. You are less likely to forget the tasks you want to do that day. Writing a list helps order your thoughts to do those items in a logical order, and I'll throw this in and we'll talk about it a little bit later, and in a personalized biological order. It helps show the bigger picture. When you do a to-do list, it helps keep your bigger picture at the forefront, the bigger picture for your day or for your goals for the week. Your to-do list, with a to-do list, you don't need to hold everything in your head. A big part of having, and we're going to talk about it, like a daily planner, weekly planner, calendar, to-do list, scratch pad, all of those things are for one, they're for several purposes, but one big one that is intertwined through all of them, and that is to limit the amount of junk we need to keep in our memory, to keep in our mind, to free our minds without having it all jumbled up with all the little things that we hope we don't forget. We need to remember to do. They keep jetting through our mind. When you unload it immediately, it's one less thought you're dealing with. Unload your mind. Use a to-do list. The to-do list saves time. Saves time. It helps you decide on priorities, the most important And the most urgent task on the list should be done first, or time left to make sure they do get done if they're not first or second on your list. Even if it means that there's some things, which always will happen most of the time, you're not going to finish everything on your daily to-do list. Okay, that's how we learn priorities. Okay, the to-do list, with a to-do list, you're less likely to become sidetracked. When you know you've got something, hey, I've got these things to do. This is my goals to accomplish. We train ourselves to not allow ourselves to get sidetracked as easy. Spend so much time on social media or whatever you do. I know what things that I fight, that we do, that you need to do to avoid getting the things that sidetrack you, is what I'm saying, that throw you off your course. Okay, a to-do list, with a to-do list, you get the reward of ticking off your achievements. That always feels good. Every time we put a little X beginning of the line or scratch through one of the items on our to-do list, that always feels good. You feel more in control when you have a to-do list and you're going through the day checking things off. You feel more like, I'm on top of this, I'm going to get these things done. You have a record of what you've done. If you keep your to-do list, you can go back and see what you've done. And you always have something to work on. That may not seem like a good thing to you, but with a to-do list, you always have something to work on. You always see that you've got plenty to do. Now, it's a good idea, and this is just one of those little psychological things, but it is in anything, just in any area of life. I don't care if you're working on a project or going through your daily to-do list, it is always a good idea and best to do the harder, less pleasant task first. Because the longer in the course of the day we put off the harder, less pleasant task, we get set in that mode of procrastination, and those are the things that usually incessantly get put off till tomorrow every day. Put off till tomorrow. And so when we just jump in there, we bite the bullet, as they say, and we do those harder, less pleasant tasks, just get them out of the way, you will be amazed how liberating it is to the mind. Okay. Prioritize your list. When you do your to-do list, you want to prioritize it. You might want to highlight, you might put 7 or 8 things on your to-do list. I'm just throwing that out there. 7 or 8 important things to do, the things you would like to get done that day. So now you might want to take a highlighter or whatever way you want to do it. If you're handwriting, you might be using, and your to-do list can be digital. I use like a daytime planner type of thing, where within each day I've got a little, task to accomplish that day, to do task list that's right in my day timer and my planner. But you'll want to prioritize your list. There's always going to be those things that, man, come what may. See, we can't always know what's going to happen in the course of the day. So we got to learn to build in downtime, build in distraction time. We're going to talk about here about things that distract us and learning to control them. But we want to prioritize our list. So if out of those 7 or 8 things that you put on your to-do list, 3 or 4 must be done that day, you want to highlight them. And even besides highlighting them, you might want to look and say, okay, here's the order I'm going to do them, and do them in some logical or psychological order. Again, maybe doing the harder, less pleasant of those most necessary tasks first. As your day goes on, your energy level genuinely will wane also. And so you want to do those more taxing things in the earlier part of the day. For the most part, most people, energy wanes through the course of the day. All right, so prioritizing your list. Now, even though you have a to-do list, it is a good idea, and it's more than a good idea. You're going to want to do this. You need to do this, again, in unloading the brain. Keep a scratch pad or a notepad with you at all times. things come to our mind. We might get inspiration for a lesson or a message preacher. Uh, Things that we remembered. Oh, did I get with that person? I need to do this. It's not necessarily a to-do list. If it's something comes up that you forgot to put on your to-do list, well, yeah, you've got it written again. You can add that to that daily to-do list. Say, oh man, I've got to get this done today. I forgot about that. But it is for future reference, a scratch pad. It can be anything from an idea to something that you just remembered you were supposed to remember, to an upcoming event that you need to make sure to get on your calendar. Just as the day goes on, get used to just writing things on that scratch pad. Get away from the habit of thinking that you're going to just, oh, I'm just going to tuck it back in my mind and I'll remember it later. I'll remember it when I get back to the house. I'll remember when I get to the office. I'll remember it when I get finished driving here. It's not going to happen. You know you're going to forget it all over again. And so just unload your mind, unburden your mind, put it on a to-do list, record it in your iPhone, whatever is comfortable for you. Develop or devise a method of keeping track of those things, whether it is digitally, manually writing it. I do a lot of the manual writing. I just, even though I have a lot of computers and iPad and my iPhone, when it comes to certain things, I'm still old school. I still like seeing it written. I still like writing with a pen or a pencil. That's just my method. That works for me. Do what works for you. The key is do it. You just start a method, develop a scheme, a game plan, and work on it and keep it something that works for you. I'm just telling you the important reasons to do it. You need to unload your brain, and you need to remember these things. All right, now we come to the calendar or planner. Okay, the calendar or planner. A recurring theme in time management is that it is better to keep track of things using a system rather than your memory. I've been mentioning that over and over. So some examples are systems for capturing project and task information, commitments, ideas and thoughts, memos, etc. So obviously, you should have some kind of a calendar that you use at all time. Now there's calendars and plenty of apps that you pull up on your iPhone that also will coordinate with your laptop or with your iPad or whatever. If you're into that and all that works for you, wonderful. I have an electronic calendar, but the one I use most is my desk calendar that I use for the calendar, for my appointments and so forth. But you want to have a calendar and a planner, because now you're scheduling the time slots in your day. And it could be for appointments, it could be for study time, it could be for prayer time, whatever is important for you to accomplish in the course of the day should be scheduled on that daily planner time slot. Don't take anything for granted. Don't assume that you're automatically going to, when that time comes up, start doing that task or being in that place or taking your prayer time. Plan it, learn to just very religiously, so to speak, plan that time, schedule it, or it won't get done often. Often it'll just be neglected. The best practice deals with all the other things that you may need to remember, such as appointments, meetings, time-sensitive paperwork, deadlines, etc. All should be in that calendar and written somewhere in that daily or weekly planner. Okay, like all other best practices, the key is to establish and consistently use a reminder system instead of having to rely on your memory alone. Again, unload your brain. That's the key. Appointment books work, whether manual or digital, they work. And it's a good thing, a good practice to take time early in your day to plan that day. You may want to do it while you're having your morning coffee, tea, whatever you do. But early in the day, we talked about getting that early start, sitting there in your quiet time, reflecting on your day, thinking, okay, here's things I need to get done. Now, some of what you need to get done may be carryover from the day before's task list, and you may have been able to not get it completed yesterday, but now today you've got less time and you realize I must get this done today. It was okay to put it off for a day yesterday because there were more pressing issues, but now I must get this done today. Well, now it has a high priority on today's to-do list, today's task list. And so you're sitting there in the early morning hours is when you get up, thinking through your times with your calendar, seeing, okay, here's the time, to my time slot scheduled for today. Here's the things I need to do in and around those time slots where I must be at a specific place, or I must be in a specific meeting, or I have a doctor's appointment, or scheduling study time, whatever it is, blocking out those times in a day and being diligent to stay within those time slots. But take time early in the day to plan that day. Any activities or conversations that are important to your success, and when I say success, the success of you completing your daily tasks, the success of whatever you deem to be successful for you, should have a time assigned to them. At the same time, we need to be wise and allow time for interruptions. You can't make an appointment and say, okay, I'm going to be in this meeting from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3, I'm going to be doing this. You've got to have some space between there, knowing that some things may run a little bit over, some things you may be able to start a little bit early, finish early. You got to allow some time for some adjustment, but within reason, allow time. Know that interruptions are going to happen. It's just part of life. One good rule of thumb, I don't care if you're in business, if you're pastoring a church, you're busy working on a project, you're studying, whatever it is that is demanding your time at the time that should be undivided, that should be holding or keeping your undivided attention. When you're involved in that, when you're in the middle of that, don't instantly, automatically give people your time. Now, I'm not saying if a family member, your wife, something like that, things happen, but don't feel obligated to instantly give people your time when you have scheduled that time slot for something else. Again, you need to build somewhat of a culture around your life that you're letting people know when you're available for phone conversations, when you're available for counseling or for meetings. If it's a catch as catch can situation and anybody can go barging in the door, interrupting any time slot that you're involved in, you're going to have a hard time keeping focus and managing your time in the course of the day. So you have to, in love, learn to schedule time for those type of events that involve other people, okay, as much as is possible. Remember also that it is impossible to get everything done. None of us, I don't care how diligent, how well-oiled our time machine is, we will never get everything done. Again, that's just the nature of life and all those things that surround us. Never get everything done. Our calendar should also be having scheduling their family obligations. For the family, there maybe should be like a master calendar somewhere in the house. And each family member should be responsible for using that family calendar to avoid last minute conflicts. Somebody coming up and saying, you've scheduled your day perfectly, and somebody coming, a child or your wife or whatever, saying, oh, but I didn't put this on the calendar, but we've got this going on today. You didn't, And so, those things can cause conflict. Those things can cause stress. And so it's good to develop good family habits of keeping a family master calendar for those things that come up, scheduling those family events, family times, things that pertain to another family member that you have to be involved in. All right. And of course, okay. So calendar and planner kind of go hand in hand, essential, and organizing your time through the course of the day. These are just good habits here, good habits. All right, next topic is prioritizing your time or your life, prioritizing it. I wrote this down Uh, and I'm just going to read it here. We need to recognize those things that we're placing too much value on and giving too much time to, that really have little value and deserve little time in the big picture or in relation to your goals, versus those things that have great value now and in eternity that we are currently making too little time for in our daily or weekly schedules. Okay, hopefully you caught that. It's on the notes, so when you listen to this, and if you have the notes with you, you'll be able to read that. Very important, though. So we need to decide whether we want pleasing feelings or pleasing results. You know, if we neglect our responsibility and just become lazy during the course of the day, and so we want to just play around on social media, or we just want to go hang out at Starbucks and read some fiction book because we like to do it and we don't feel like working. Yeah, it might be a pleasing feeling, right? It's a pleasing feeling, but you are not going to get the sense of pleasing results. Pleasing results. Pleasing results are much more long-lasting, much deeper, and a much better feeling than just temporal pleasing feelings that allow us to prolong accomplishing those things that we need to accomplish. All that does ultimately is build up stress and frustration, because then, for the most part, unless you are totally irresponsible and you have no life goals and you have no responsibilities in life, in which case I'm not sure why you would even be tuning into one of these sessions. But unless you're in that category, which I don't believe any of you are that would be listening to this, then there are things that are going to pile up when we take those, when we check out for those time periods just to have pleasing feelings for a while. It's going to ultimately cause a conflict and build up our stress level and our frustration level, because now we have less time to accomplish those things that we do need to get done. And two things happen. When we do things like that through stress and frustration, and we end up doing them more quickly than the time that should be allotted to them, they're not done as well. And so now you did not do the job as well. You did not do it with excellence. You did it because it had to be done, and you didn't allow enough time for it, and you just did it because it had to be done. And so that done repetitively builds up frustration and disappointment in our life. And so I would much rather have pleasing results than just temporary pleasing feelings. Not that we all want pleasing feelings now and then, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to get at here. But I'm talking about when we always want to check out and have pleasing feelings, we're not often going to have pleasing results. It's a trade-off. There's that old 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule. 20%, and this is in the business world, 20% of the sales reps make 80% of the commissions. In the church, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. In any institution, in any commercial enterprise, that they say that 80-20 rule applies. And so what I have learned and observed in life is that the reason that 20% of people, even in the church, 20% of the saints accomplish 80% of the work, is that 20% are doing all the things that the 80% just simply don't want to do. The 80% would rather most of the time have pleasing feelings rather than pleasing results. And so we use that word apathy. They're apathetical. They An apathetical person does not necessarily care about the outcome. They don't necessarily care about the results. And so, therefore, without that burden on them of caring about what results are, they just coast with the tide, so to speak. It's easy for them to settle into a mode of life of just going from pleasant feeling to pleasant feeling, from entertaining time slots to entertaining time slots, to not caring, not letting it bother them if they accomplish much or little in life. Those are the 80%. The 20%, though, are the ones that are wanting to accomplish something in life, that are wanting to hit their goals, reach their goals. And those are the ones that I'm hoping I'm speaking to here in these sessions. But the 20% do what the 80% won't do. And these are some of the things that the 80% don't do, okay? Some of these little details that I'm talking about. If you think the majority of people keep day timers and keep scratch pads with them to unload their brain of the little details, or even care about the little details, you're mistaken. Most people don't care. Remember that you can do almost anything, but you cannot do everything. We'll never get everything done. The best practice of prioritizing means taking conscious control of our choices and choosing to spend more time on the projects and tasks that are important and valuable, and less time on the ones that are not as important or valuable. Now, that may seem like a no-brainer, but we need to very intentionally distinguish the task at hand, which ones warrant our attention and which ones do not warrant our immediate attention. We need to learn to do that. Again, it may sound obvious, but the fact is that the vast majority of people don't put much thought on how they spend their time. They just don't. They just flow through life, going wherever the current will take them, doing whatever grabs their attention next, or repeating the same thing day after day out of habit and routine. Now, routine can work for or against us because routines become habitual. So if we're doing something that is a negative routine that begins to ingrain itself habitually in our mind, well, we've got something, we've got issues we need to deal with. A routine can also involve, the Bible talks about sins of omission and sins of commission. Routines can involve things that we do, and routines can involve things that we neglect to do, which leads me, in talking about our daily schedule, to talk about prayer and fasting, things that get easily neglected on our to-do list. Now, most of us are very busy. Our time is very pressed. That goes without saying. And so, in the course of a busy day, unless we come to grips with the fact that we need to schedule diligently, intentionally, important tasks, daily tasks in our life, they must be scheduled intentionally. If we do not do that, those tasks will often be skipped over and neglected routinely. And the more we do it, the easier it is to do it, the easier it is to skip them, the easier it is to not relegate good quality time to those important tasks. And one of those tasks that I'm talking about is our prayer life. This is where I'm talking about where I'm trying to, fine-tune this talk and idea of time management for us as apostolics as opposed to the business world. So I learned many years ago, my wife and I made a commitment many years ago, and excuse the personal reference, but the very first thing that I do when I roll out of bed at 6:15 every morning, besides getting up, wash my face, brush my teeth, and making my coffee, is just getting myself ready to be downstairs and have my hour of prayer. The first words out of my mouth are to the Lord Jesus Christ. They're not to my wife. They're not on a cell phone. They're not checking my email. They're not checking with Facebook, not messaging anybody, not turning on a television set. I don't have a television set. I have a set, but we don't have any feed for it, personal choice. But is my sweet hour of prayer. If I do not get it done first, too often I get so busy, or if I plan on doing it at night at the end of the day, I cannot devote my full attention to it because I'm a little weary-minded. I learned my best prime time to really talk to the Lord, to get my prayer time in, quality prayer time, is that first hour of the day. It's done, it's finished. And I don't mean to put this in the negative way that it may sound, but it's out of the way, if you understand what I mean. If during the course of the day I'm driving, I want to talk to the Lord, it's a pleasant, stress-free talking to the Lord, not out of guilt that it's the only time that I spent with the Lord, that I'm trying to squeeze in 10 minutes of semi-focused prayer time while I'm driving because it's the only time I had to do it kind of prayer. I think you understand what I'm talking about. And so talking about scheduling time and prioritizing, I believe for apostolics, that very first time slot in the daytime should be our time in talking to the Lord. Early will I rise and talk to him, as David said, early. And so that should be the very first thing on our schedule. That, and I even throw in my scripture reading time after my breakfast. I'm able to do that. I work out of the home, so my schedule allows that, thank God. All right. So those are the things that I do. Those things that sometimes get pushed to the side are all a part of my morning routine. Again, this is my schedule. This is what I do every day of the 5 days of the week. Saturday I'm generally working, and so I'm not able to do some of the things that I'm talking about here. For example, after my prayer time is my exercise time. We have a gym in the home here, and my scripture reading time, my breakfast. So all of those things are all done so that by 9 a.m., 8:45 to 9 a.m., when I hit the office and I'm ready to start my work day, all those most important central things are already behind me. Those things. Okay. I've exercised. I'm in a good space. I prayed. Good frame of mind, and so I'm ready to tackle my day. So unless we intentionally schedule these things in the course of our day, too often they will be routinely neglected, folks, is what I'm getting across. And I forgive me if I sound like I'm preaching to you. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to be emphatic with some keys that I learned in my life. That time of prayer should be scheduled daily so that you do not miss it. All right. Staying focused. Staying focused. We need to identify things that fight against us. Fight against us. One is procrastination. Ben Franklin, you know his quote that he made very famous, never leave that until tomorrow, which you can do today. It was Ben Franklin that made that quote. Never leave until tomorrow what you can do today. But procrastination is one of the things we have to fight, just putting things off. And so often those things are things that are more tedious tasks or things that we fight that we don't like doing as much. Our mind just wants to work against it, just not doing it. When we learn a little mental toughness and we get those things out of the way first, you will find yourself liberated psychologically when you learn the key to not letting those things master your mind, and you getting on top of them and beating them, getting them done. Distractions come in all shapes, sizes. You just name it. Talking about staying focused. These are things that fight against us. If you're trying to focus on studying and you have loud music playing in the background, obviously that's a distraction. You cannot fully focus on that and have all that distraction in the background. Any kind of white noise like that is going to pull our focus away. Again, I don't know the environment that you do the things that you do, but we need to learn to somewhat control our environment to keep it free as much as possible of distractions that pull us away. Distractions can be people. It could be anything. We could, we'll hit some of them here. Another thing that fights our focus, and this goes against some of the teaching of the business world or the computer age world that we live in. But I used to pride myself in multitasking. And truth be known, I try to avoid it as much as possible now, because multitasking leads to difficulty in concentration. You cannot do two things or three things well at once. You just can't. We may think we do, but we don't. So it is better and more efficient to stay focused at the task at hand, complete it, and then go to the next thing. Multitasking will lead to difficulty in concentration. It gets our mind jumping all over the place. We get so used to doing a couple of things at once, we have a hard time focusing on any one thing clearly and well. That's what happens. Unnecessary meetings can cause us to lose focus. Meetings I know are necessary, but unnecessary meetings are not necessary. Environmental issues that I mentioned. Now, here's one you need to think about that can be a problem with staying focused. Not matching the task at hand to your energy level at that time. You know, early, just speaking of me again, earlier morning hours for me, those times before noon are some of my most focused time. And then I begin to get into a little bit, I can feel it, a little bit of an energy drop during those afternoon hours. And then it's strange, but in the evening hour after dinner, my evening hours, sometimes later evening hours, I get that like second wind where I become, more focused and more creative minded. It seems, for me, that's how my biological clock works in that way. And so it is good to try to match the tasks that you need to do with, your mental focus, your clarity of thought, your physical energy level, those times of the day. I never want to study anything too deeply, like right after lunch up until that dinner time. I'm just not real well focused. Not saying I never do. Sometimes I have to, but my key times are my morning hours, early morning hours. I like early morning, and then late night. Those are my best times for me for just focused, quiet study times. That works for me. Or anything that I need to do that demands my attention, even if it's some detailed administrative things like working on a database or working on detailed forms, that sort of thing. Those are my best times. You need to find your best times for doing the tasks that you need to do, and learn to work around those times so you get you can put your best effort forward in the most focused way. All right. Here's one that's kind of a no-brainer if you're trying to focus. Turn off instant messenger and that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with not immediately answering a message, when you get somebody messaging you. There's a book that I'm going to mention in a little bit here that talks about that demand that is on us for instant replies. No boundaries at all on our space due to today's technological world. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. All right, let's talk about managing. I'm still under the category of staying focused, and I hope you're staying with me. I know I can rattle on and talk rather quickly, talk kind of speedily here, so hopefully you're staying with me. But talking about staying focused, the next category under that I want to talk about is managing external time wasters. Telephone is one of those, the phone. And this is just, some time management techniques regarding if you have to use the phone a lot. Okay. Avoid small talk as much as possible. Stand while talking. Allow some calls just to go to your voicemail so that you can schedule a time to return those calls. And schedule a time to return those calls. Those are just some management techniques for the telephone. When you're on a conversation and you know that you've got time scheduled through the day, every phone call you get does not need to, chase rabbits here and there and talk about fishing and hunting and, your favorite ball team and all those things when you're trying to stay on a schedule through the course of a day. Avoid some small talk. Stand while you're talking. It makes you stay a little bit more focused. Try it. I use through my business day, I use a wireless headset so that I can walk and talk and stand while I talk. For some reason, I just stay more focused that way. It's hands-free, and I can use a keyboard while I talk, etc. All right. Use voicemail, set time to return calls. All right. Email. In the business world, they have what is called the 6-12-6 rule. That means that they check the email at 6 a.m., 12 in the middle of the day, and 6. That's when they go through their email, do their responses. In other words, we can get into this thing, and again, you can use 8-12-4 if that works for you. 8 a.m., 12 in the afternoon, and 4 in the afternoon, if that works for you. The key is not just being a slave to our email. Every time an email comes in, or every 10 minutes checking our email, pulling away from what we're doing because we want to see if anybody emailed us. During that period of time that you're writing down your 15-minute increments of what you're doing during that time, if you're being honest, it might shock you how often you check Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, emails, messages. If you're honest and you see exactly how much time you're spending on that, you'll see the importance of wanting to learn to schedule and control the amount of time that you spend on those different areas of media, etc. All right. So with email, you want to schedule times to review and to respond, doing it all at once, maybe even if it's a couple of times a day, but not being a slave to it, to where people are expecting an instantaneous response. Meetings. If you have meetings to attend, know the purpose of the meeting in advance. Arrive on time, start and end the meeting on time, prepare the agenda, and stick to it. Don't let meetings just develop a life of their own with small talk, side conversations, meandering, not quite sure of the purpose of the meeting. Prepare the agenda and stick to it. Don't schedule a meeting unless it's necessary. There are so many other ways to communicate with people now. Oftentimes, face-to-face meetings are not absolutely necessary. And oftentimes, even a face-to-face meeting can be handled without ever leaving your study or your office. It's called Zoom, it's called Skype, and any number of other available mediums out there to be able to schedule even face-to-face meetings with people, or a couple of people at a time, and save a lot of time. All right. Mail. Sort mail over a garbage can. That's my one big suggestion when you're going through your mail. Sort it over a garbage can. If you know you get the same piece of mail from the same bank all the time and it's a credit card offer, or the same piece of mail from an investment company to go to a free dinner and hear they're talking about your retirement, or whatever thing, as soon as you identify the envelope and you know what it is, don't waste time opening it. Garbage can. Sort it over a garbage can. Good rule of thumb with paper is not get into a thing of like opening up a piece of mail and reading it and setting aside, saying, okay, I'll deal with that tomorrow. I will deal with that later. Be in the place that you can, again, here's the filing system. File it where it needs to be while you're handling it. It never is efficient to handle a piece of paper twice for no reason. That's never efficient. Open your mail over a garbage can, open it where you're able to. If it's a bill, you put it in with your monthly bills. If it's a correspondence, you need to return correspondence, the return correspondence file on your desk. I need to write a letter, which who writes letters nowadays, but I'm saying if it happened and there's correspondence that you need to write, it does happen in my business, that return correspondence, it goes in the file. I need to return this correspondence. Never just pile it all up and let it sit there, where you have to then again go through it and refresh your memory as to what the subject of it was. As soon as you read it, you know what it is, file it appropriately. Time saver. Okay. Another thing that is important to, and this, you may not think of this, but as relating to time management, but it certainly is. If we're goal conscious and we're working on setting and accomplishing goals, staying healthy is important. And scheduling time to relax, unwind physically and mentally aids our overall health. Getting enough sleep aids our health, aids our clarity of mind, our sharpness. Poor time management results in fatigue, moodiness, frequent illness. Any number of maladies are related to poor time management. We don't realize the stress we put on ourselves when we do not have a sense of accomplishment at the end of a day, multiplied many days in a row, for weeks, for months. We feel like we're behind. We're not accomplishing what we need to. We're frustrated. We feel inefficient. All those things work against our good health, work against our good, clear psyche. Staying healthy involves exercising, making sure you're getting some proper exercise. I exercise daily, but it only takes me 20 minutes. I'm 66 years old, so I'm not running 5 miles a day. I don't have the time for it, nor do I feel like running 5 miles a day. But I do those exercises to keep my heart rate up, for just things that keep my muscles taut. I'm not a muscle builder, but exercise that's relevant to my life and my lifestyle to make sure that, I'm keeping my joints healthy and, that sort of thing. You decide what's good for you. If you need an hour a day and you're able to schedule it in, wonderful. But take some time for exercising, because all this relates to goals and, accomplishing and clear-mindedness and staying focused. All these things are all intertwined. Ben Franklin, another quote from him, "Well done is better than well said." All right, here's a category now, and this is processing inputs. Processing inputs. Here's 5 options for handling information, whether it is email, whether it is returning a phone call. These are just general inputs: email, phone call, physical mail, snail mail, they call it. 5 options for handling info. Toss or delete if it relates to an electronic sort of an input. Toss it or delete. Delegate its response. Act on it or file temporarily until you receive more info, or file permanently. So again, toss it or delete it, delegate it, act on it, file temporarily until you receive more info to be able to finalize it, or file it permanently. It's something that's just an important paper that needs to be filed in that excellent filing system you're going to develop. Okay, so those are the 5 options with handling inputs, processing inputs. I read in a business book about a 30-second rule, that if you're handling anything, any type of input, that you can do with it what needs to be done within approximately 30 seconds. Do it then. Don't put it off. Because see, then you've devoted a lot more than 30 seconds to it, because now you're going to revisit it. So if it can be accomplished, filed, delegated, deleted, whatever, if it can be done in 30 seconds, do it right then. Okay. And it's also good, in talking about all these inputs, to schedule a designated time to do these things. There's nothing wrong with saying, here's my hour of the day that I am going to handle my emails, I'm going to return phone calls, I'm going to go through my mail, right? All those things can be done. If you get a huge amount and you have to schedule 90 minutes, what I'm trying to say is, when you schedule these type of tasks all together and you're focusing on processing inputs, you can schedule the time to do it rather than having to worry about it all through the course of the day. People will learn that you're the type that is organized, that handles it at a specific time. They will learn not to expect an immediate response from you in email, etc. Okay, that you're not going to return the phone call immediately unless it's something that, you know, is an emergency that has to be handled. Okay, now here's what I want to talk to us about for a few minutes. Avoid overload. This can happen with pastors so easily, busy people so easily. There's a book that I'm going to give you a reading assignment. Again, I can't make you do anything. I'm going to strongly suggest that you read this book. I read it years ago. I felt a need in just the last couple of weeks to pull this out of my bookshelf again and read it again, and it's ministering to me again now. And the book is called The Overload Syndrome. It's written by a medical doctor, Richard A. Swenson. He's a Christian, not an apostolic, but a good Christian man. Good Christian principles. The Overload Syndrome by Richard A. Swenson. Swenson. There's the book. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of things here because I want you to get an idea here. But this book is excellent. It will help you, not only now, but down the road. Just read a couple of excerpts here. Whenever we quit for the day, it is always arbitrary. The world is not yet perfect, but we ceased our efforts. There is still more to be done, and yet we're going to sleep. The fact is, whenever we quit, we are abandoning the job unfinished for the most part, because the job can never be finished. Life is always a process, and it is the process that God is concerned with more than the productivity. He knows perfectibility is not possible, and that all our labors are feeble against the brokenness of the world. When we overly emphasize productivity, a typically American thing to do, we often pervert the process. Instead of faith, we substitute work. Instead of depth, we substitute speed. Instead of love, we substitute money. Instead of prayer, we substitute busyness. Just an excerpt. One of the things that keeps us really trapped more than we would ever realize in our world today, and this is one of the things that has come about really in the last 10 years especially, it is technology. We look at technology as being great progress, and it is in many, many ways. It really is in many, many ways. But what we do not realize is how technology has invaded our personal boundaries. It's giving us very little margin in life, what the writer calls margin in life. And I'm just touching on a few things. I strongly suggest you read the book. It'll help you. It'll help every one of you. I promise you. Talk about accessibility, the demands on our instant accessibility that I've been talking about. A major unintended consequence of the flood of assessing technologies is that soon there will be no natural excuse for being unavailable. In the midst of our enthusiasm for the telecommunication revolution, we have not sufficiently discerned the horrifying psychic cost of what columnist William Safire has called unrestrained reachability. Don't get me wrong, I like people. Some of my best friends are people, but I also like to escape from time to time. Where were you all day? I tried to call you 5 times. Your boss or church members or in-laws or friends will say. And because virtually everyone will carry cell phones, you will have no excuse. I turned off my cell phone. You what? What will this be like for exhausted pastors on vacation, etc.? And this is kind of the tone of this book that'll help us do some rethinking about that constant accessibility that we feel is inescapable in today's world. Busyness is not a synonym for kingdom work. Jesus Christ does not want us to be frantically about his work. You think of the simple life, the very thoughtful way that Jesus Christ scheduled his day, and you are not going to see a frantic Jesus running around from day to day, multitasking, not focusing on the task at hand, always worrying about what's next, etc. Nor does he want his followers to be that way. One more little segment I want to read for you here in this book. Again, please get this. You will enjoy it. William Shakespeare was born in 1564. 1564. When he died in 1616, the world around him was not very different from the world he was born into. The occupational spectrum was the same, lifestyles were unchanged, disease and life expectancy were the same, family makeup was the same, and so it has been from generation to generation, for century upon century, that life has been slow and static, with the most accurate descriptor being same, not changing. But at the beginning of this century, 20th century, this book was written at the end of the last century. But at the beginning of this century, change picked up momentum. It has continued to accelerate through the last few decades, and the acceleration is not linear, but exponential. Change is like a massive tidal wave that sweeps us up and dominates us by its own independent and autonomous strength. As a direct consequence, it has given birth to an unprecedented stress epidemic that has taxed our capacity for adaptation. For millennia, change was slow, controlled, accessible. Now it convulses at warp speed. There has been more change from 1900 to the present than in all recorded history prior to 1900, and there is no deceleration in sight. Change and stress reside together in the same equation. The key to understanding stress is understanding change. And so this is the backdrop of the world that you and I live in. And it's important to recognize that and learn to operate within that backdrop, within some parameters of sanity and calm and focus. Those are the keys. One other thing I'll touch on that can cause a lot of stress, that can produce, and this book addresses it also, that can produce a lot of conflict in us attaining our ministerial goals. And that is the danger of debt. We would probably be shocked at the number of men and women who have a calling on their life, who cannot adequately fulfill that calling because their debt has so strangled them, just chained them to long hours and busyness, that it does not enable them to fulfill that little promise, that little voice inside that has called them, that they believe, that they know that there's more that God wants them to do. They're trapped in a debt world. So I won't get into that now, but There's something to be reckoned with, something to be recognized of our lifestyle and how much time we want to devote to a lifestyle at the expense of a ministry. We're the ones that determine that trade-off. Setting goals. I'm going to finish up here with setting goals, and I know this is probably going well over an hour. If you want to listen to this in bits and pieces, have at it. But I wanted to get it all in. Setting goals. Yogi Berra, I love some of his quotes. Here's a quote from Yogi Berra regarding goals. You've got to be very careful if you don't know where you are going, because you might not get there. Yogi Berra. Napoleon Hill said, a goal is a dream with a deadline. A dream with a deadline. I believe that. Now, a large goal can be intimidating and cause procrastination. That's why we need to learn the ability, and this is through time management, this is through organization, this is through learning a little bit about administration, that when we have a goal, we need to learn how to break it into small, manageable pieces and then proceed in a logical order to fulfill that long-term goal. If we look to just the goal and we let our mind get filled with all that needs to be done to attain that goal, what ends up happening more often than not is procrastination. That hesitation to get started because of perhaps not feeling up to some of the tasks that are involved to attain that goal, or all of the work that will be involved. Are we willing to invest the time and the work that will be involved to reach that goal? So many variables go in to what causes procrastination, that those are some things that we need to, in a very heartfelt way, in a meditative way, sort through in our own minds of what is keeping us from reaching the goals that we feel God has shown us in our life. But goals need to be broken into smaller tasks, Our number one goal is apostolics. Number one goal. If this should be our foundational goals, every one of us, regardless of our role or responsibility in our individual congregations. Our number one goal is to make heaven our home. Primary, foundational, key, any way you want to express it. Through it all, we must make heaven our home. So to accomplish that will take several smaller acts over an extended period of time. We know that. We need to develop faithfulness to the house of God, faithful to the things of God, faithful to prayer, faithful to our giving. All those things are prerequisites, are all requirements to reaching that goal. So we need to intentionally do those little tasks through the course of the day, through the course of the week, that we know that we're in line to reach that goal. It's a what do they call it? It's not a sprint. It's a long race, and the word is skipping my mind right now. I'm getting a little wearied, but it's a long race that we're in. It's not a sprint. So we need to redeem our time wisely, schedule our time wisely. All goals must be specific and measurable. There's a big difference between a wish and a goal. I've heard men in very small churches, and I'm not just throwing this out there, I've specifically heard a pastor in a very small church of 30 to 35 say that he believes God, is going to grow the church to 3,000 people. you know, in knowing the man, and it's been borne out. I don't need to get to the ugly details, but in knowing the man, it was a wish. It was a pipe dream. There was nothing at all in place to ever attain that goal in that man. And so there's a difference between a wish and a goal. And we need to learn to discern between those two. If it's a goal, we need to set out logically, incrementally, lay out a pattern, lay out a path to attain that goal. The goal, we need to review what we're doing along the way. We need to chart the progress of that goal to make sure we're still on course. Most importantly, all other goals that we set cannot be in any way conflicting with us achieving that number one goal that I mentioned. Anytime we set a goal, there cannot be any other goals that are going to conflict with that goal, or we're setting ourselves up for failure. So when we set a goal, we need to make sure that it is in alignment with other goals that we have already charted a course to attain. Okay. And there's so much more we could talk about, but I'm going to end it with that. Again, I apologize for the length of this session. I hope you can get something out of it. Be sure to get the notes with this. If you don't already have the notes at the beginning of this lesson, there are notes that are associated with it that you can get online from our resource page at missionsamerica.aljc.org. And God bless. I'll see you our next session. And I appreciate your watching this session.